tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from 2001, A Space Odyssey. With the help of our special guest, Quad CMO Josh Golden. Josh, how are you?
I'm terrific, Ian. I got to tell you, I get to go on, at podcasts now and then, but very rarely do I get to speak about my most favorite film ever. I know it's from 1968, before I was born, but this movie is so exciting, and I'm excited to apply the lessons to marketing today. I promise you.
We are thrilled because, it's foundational. Well, we'll get into it. Zooming out, before we do that, just tell us a little bit about your role as CMO of Quad.
Sure. So I've been the CMO now just over 4 years. So I came to Quad just after my time at Ad Age, when I ran Ad Age, and I was looking for an opportunity to help a brand that was in need of its next step, its next evolution. It's what I kind of do as a marketer. And Quad is very interesting because its roots are in production and manufacturing and the making of things, originally in magazines, now more recently and of late, direct mail, of course, catalogs. And then very recently, agency work, digital work, data work, performance marketing, et cetera, packaging, in-store, all those things were added on more recently. And my job was to figure out, how do I tell a united and complete story for Quad that for a marketer was easy to consume. The, of course, interesting thing about being here at the right time was figuring out that many marketers were facing this similar challenge of too many vendors, too many partners, too hard to coordinate and get everyone's corralled to focus on a singular goal in Quad, because we are a company of an amazing culture, a Midwestern culture, if you will. It allows for a wonderful story to be told. And that was my job, to figure out that singular story and get it out there and tell stories about how great Quad is and can help you for your business.
Meredith, what the heck is 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Meredith, don't undersell this. I need you to go all the way. I need it to, because people are like, I don't even know what this movie is, so it better be amazing.
Oh my gosh, the pressure is on. I'll lean on you too a little bit, Josh, because I'm not an expert, but I did look into...
I don't know that I'm an expert, but I have read 3 books on it, so I am a little bit of a geek about it.
Well, you're more of an expert than I am. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, this is the beauty of marketing, right? It's you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be one. What is it? What's the old adage of?
You don't have to beat the bear in a race. You just have to beat the slowest person behind you.
That's right. I was going to say that you just have to learn the lesson the night before you teach it. But yeah, same thing. Don't get eaten by the bear. One or both. But no, just... Yeah, Meredith, get into it. You know it all. She's the master.
Well, I like looking into the making of things, and 2001: The Space Odyssey is generally considered a masterpiece. How's that? And it changed and defined cinema. We're going there. It's a sci-fi movie directed by Stanley Kubrick. Came out in 1960, like you mentioned. It's loosely based on a short story by the sci-fi writer Arthur C. Clarke called The Sentinel.
Dave, do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Rumors about something being dug up on the moon.
And one thing about Kubrick that I think is really remarkable is his meticulous attention to detail. And so what's notable is that even though the story is fiction, Kubrick brought in NASA engineers and designers as consultants to make sure that the technology of the spacecraft looked authentic, looked real. And so on top of that, the production designer, Tony Masters, also made sure every tool and set was not only realistic, but functional. So everything was usable. The film also pioneered a handful of techniques. There's something called like a slit scan photography, and that was used during the Stargate sequence, and that blurs and distorts the film. But the other thing was, in certain parts, the actors were supposed to be weightless, so they had them suspended by wires that were invisible to the camera, but they also had designed a $750,000 rotating set for the Discovery spaceship that made it so that actors appeared like they were floating.
Which is about $7 million today.
Yeah, easily.
So very expensive.
Super expensive. And some of the special effects shots had thousands and thousands of technical steps to actually get the shot. And so he had like these expanding reference sheets basically that he was looking at to make sure that he did step by step to get this one shot that he had in mind. So it's pretty spectacular. Kubrick had also decided that the film would be largely nonverbal. So there are large expanses where there's no dialogue. And he
42
said,
minutes. 42 minutes of no talking. What does that happen in a movie?
It's crazy. He said, I tried to create a visual experience, one that bypasses verbalized pigeonholing and directly penetrates the subconscious with an emotional and philosophic content. So instead...
This guy was nuts. He was a crazy person.
Yeah. Bonkers.
Yeah. The way he describes things, it's like, oh my gosh, he just had a vision, you know? So instead, he decided he wanted to use music to evoke certain emotions. And he didn't want to do like an elaborate film score. He decided instead to use classical music, like there's The Blue Danube by Johann Strauss. And then when there were speaking parts, there would be no music. So there's this sort of like stark difference in...
Well, we wouldn't have too many alternatives.
I don't think we'd have any alternatives. There isn't a single aspect of ship operations that's not under his control. If he were proven to be malfunctioning, I wouldn't see how we'd have any choice but disconnection.
I'm afraid I agree with you.
There'd be nothing else to do.
In each scene, Kubrick said, I intended the film to be an intensely subjective experience that reaches the viewer at an inner level of consciousness, just as music does. You're free to speculate as you wish about the philosophical and allegorical meaning of the film, but I don't want to spell out a verbal roadmap for 2001 that every viewer will feel obligated to pursue, or else fear that he's missed the point. It had a budget of just over $10 million and drew over $66 million at the box offices worldwide. And it was also nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including winning Kubrick an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. And it was even selected by the United States Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry in 1991. So it's definitely been recognized as one of the greatest films of all time. But
I mean, that's pretty good. You did a good rundown on that one. I will tell you, there's a few. I can go into a few more details on what you think we'll talk about. But I think overall, just sort of setting the stage, right? The film itself was if you can think in 1968, what your average sci-fi movie incorporated, it was like, I am a robot and pachoo, pachoo, pachoo. It was a lot of human beings inside of costumes behaving as if they, and that sort of suspension of disbelief. What Kubrick decided to do was to truly and accurately represent what he believed 2001 could look like if, in fact, space travel existed. Well, how would I know? So he went and interviewed IBM and NASA engineers and said, well, what would the tools actually look like to work in outer space? What would the systems be like? What would the infrastructure be like? What would the ways of communicating be like? All those things were invented. And I watched it recently on a 70 millimeter print in Brooklyn. And it was amazing. By the way, Meredith, one more thing. There was actually a soundtrack to the movie that was fully completed and produced. And the artist then went to the opening and heard Richard Strauss and Richard Strauss, All spake Zarathustra, totally replacing the original soundtrack that he had actually written and recorded. So Kubrick was just like, no, we're not doing the thing you did all that effort in. Same thing with Arthur C. Clarke. The two of them holed up in a hotel here in Manhattan and actually wrote the screenplay because the Sentinel was the original thought, but they had to figure out, well, what is this movie going to be about? It was 3 chapters. One was a chapter about innovation. One was the chapter about sort of at the moon, the exploration and discovery. And then finally, sort of the trip to Jupiter, all of which has like maybe, in a normal script, it's 120 pages of, dialogue. This was a lot of description, or maybe not so much description, maybe 40 pages of dialogue, like really very little. Very little. Anyway, fabulous movie, but what a statement to make about the evolution of what the future could look like, but also depicting the future so brilliantly.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
I wanted to talk more about what it's actually about, Josh. And I feel like I want to lean on you a little bit for this too, because there are several different storylines happening. Like one is with apes finding this monolith. One is discovering another monolith on the moon.
On the moon, yes.
And then another is a trip to Jupiter. So I know that Kubrick wanted everyone to sort of take their own, do their own analysis, their own interpretation of the movie. So wondering if you can talk a little bit about the first time you saw it, and then talking more about what happens. Yeah. And your interpretation of it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my first time I saw it, I think I was 8. I could have been younger because I think my father loved this movie so dearly. Okay. Full disclosure. It was the 60s and there was a lot about mind exploration. So, they were interested in like things that, made your mind expand. We would just go and be like, I think I saw this movie before. Like it was my version of Toy Story. Or, whatever. Like they would bring us to the movie theater to watch 2001. And I'd be like, I think we saw this before. It is a 3.5-hour movie with no talking. And I'm an 8-year-old going, what? There's a smell in the theater. And I don't know what that is. And I am like trying to understand what this movie is about. First 42 minutes is, effectively apes on the savannah trying to survive, figuring out how do I survive, getting access to water, getting access to food, and living in high proximity with dangerous animals and it being attacked. So Kubrick had to figure out, how do I show apes, evolving? And the moment of evolution, of course, is, I'm giving away a little bit of the movie pieces, but the truth is, it doesn't take away the brilliance of the moment. There is a moment where the lead ape in the book named Moonwalker, he discovers or has a moment of a eureka moment, if you will. And that eureka moment happened with the use of a tool and the singular use of a singular bone that would allow him to protect his clan, have food from, an animal that was nearby and potentially, fend off an invader to get to their water hole. And that moment of inspiration led to the success of the species. Fast forward about 6 million years, he throws the bone in the air and it immediately jump cuts to a spaceship. Now, big moment, right? From a bone to a spaceship. How does that even happen? The point is, Kubrick was trying to make this point of the moment you have your first idea, I believe. It's also discussed in the book a little bit, the making of, if you will, that inspiration can lead to everything, which can lead to other tools, which can lead to bigger ideas, which can lead to everything, even a spaceship in outer space. So you fast forward 6 million years later, and suddenly you're building spaceships to go to the moon. And so, but there's no talking for 42 minutes that in this movie until the first words you hear are people sort of landing on the moon. And there's a brilliant sequence that happens, which is part of the $750,000 investment, where they had the Jupiter. This is actually in the shuttle, but the shuttle itself also used a revolving stage because there's gravity and we're on Earth. If you're in space, there's not no gravity, but much less gravity. So they had a revolving camera, one that was mounted to the foreground and one that was turning in the background. So this actress was able to look like she was walking, and she was in fact walking fully upside down while the camera is now flipped upside down and she's exiting, but she's just sort of walked in place. That I was like, what is happening? How is this looking like it's possible? That moment was such an inspiration because it was so surprising, but it was all done in camera. There was no CGI. There was no wires. They just figured out how to do it, how to make it look like it was real. And so there's just such great things so that's the second part, where they find the monolith on the moon, and they're like, and that sends a signal when they touch the monolith, that sends a signal to Jupiter, and they realize they have to go to Jupiter, and there's a whole spaceship that goes, this is chapter 3 effectively, where they're figuring out what's going to happen in Jupiter when we find whatever these aliens have left. As a matter of fact, there's a big part of this book about where they figured out, like, well, what should the aliens look like? The best way to do an alien is to just never show the alien. Just like in Jaws, the best way to show the fear in a swimmer is not to show the Jaws or the shark, is to just play the music. So John Williams and Steven Spielberg was having a whole lot of trouble getting Jaws to look real and be scary. He's like, and John Williams was like, I got it. I got these 2 notes. It'll solve your whole problem. Minor second. Anyway, the last segment is the sort of descent into Jupiter and finding and meeting the aliens, if you will. They never actually meet, but there is an understanding of what happens, which is basically an understanding of the fourth dimension and of time travel, and the message being delivered, which it's not explicitly clear in the movie, is you walk away with your own understanding of, well, what does this movie mean? What did I just spend the last 3 hours doing? And I believe that the movie is about the connection. Why is this all the case? A lot of this is about the sort of the expansion of your mind and thinking bigger than just our 3-dimensional universe, and how time can exist in much more fluid than we consider it to be. The thought of the movie itself, it's a riddle. It's not really something you're ever going to solve, but it's this understanding of that there is something out there that's bigger than just us. And there are likely other beings, and it's just a matter of time until that can happen. And the time expenditure is what Kubrick was really sort of getting at. The movie itself is worth it just to watch the visual amazingness of this masterpiece, but also just to sort of think about the impact and how each of these ideas that were invented in 1968 and exist now. That is just the narrative of the movie, which, by the way, is thin. It's terrific.
I think also worth noting, so Kubrick is 40 when he makes this.
Yeah, young man.
Young man. He'd already made a handful of films, including Spartacus and Dr. Strangelove. So
Strangelove and Spartacus were just before.
Yeah. So
Barry Lyndon and The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut were after.
Yeah, so Clockwork Orange is 3 years later.
Clockwork Orange and these two, those three, Shining, Clockwork Orange, and 2001 were the biggies for him.
Well, and so 80 is Shining, 87 Full Metal Jacket, 99 Eyes Wide Shut. So you're talking about, like, again, he's Pantheon director, but I think it's important to note that he was already an established, very, very, very established person when he decided to make this. So, you can get the $10 million budget, which, again, $10 million at those times, a lot of money, and to do this sort of big, crazy, ambitious project, which I think is important to note, that when he's trying to make this, like he has bona fides, right? When he goes to make this, which is, his classic, what we know about him, his rigor, which is probably underselling it, is acceptable sort of at this time, right? It's like, it's Stanley being Stanley.
Yes. I think in today's age, they would call him an asshole.
Yeah, big time. I think they called him that at the time as well.
They may have. He was certainly, I think, realistically, a maniacal. And that was probably, I think that's what made it was acceptable at the time to be that way.
Yeah. I mean, and I think just, it's just a different world. But I think that being a director and trying to make something really crazy and hard, that you sort of, that I think that there was an understanding that if you're going to work with this person who is a certain way, that they make things a certain way and it's their way or the highway. And if you don't want to work with that person, then, whatever, there's lots of Hollywood implications there. But the idea being that, like, I think that it's important to sort of like look at this thing to say, he's doing something that nobody else had ever done in a way that nobody else had ever done it, in a way that only he, in his mind, thinks that he can do this, right? It's like the only way to do it is to do it this crazy way. So I want to touch hope. So my first sort of a big sort of takeaway from this is, of course, not showing the aliens, right? It's the biggest thing.
He tried. He had 19 different model makers trying, but like they're like, nah, no aliens.
So that's what I was going to say. So he did in fact make the aliens, right?
They did.
He did.
He hated everyone.
Yeah, and he hated them, and and if you go Google it, you can see a bunch of the different aliens that he came up with. But it's really interesting, like how much worse is this movie if he had put actual aliens in it?
So it would have made immediately like, I can't believe you did it.
Yeah. So my point there is that, and your point about Jaws is great, which is he didn't not make aliens. He made many aliens, but he just didn't like them.
Yeah.
And so I think
also like 30 different versions of the monolith that he just hated.
Oh, that's
finally got in.
Of course. So I think it's just an important thing, like as a creator, to remember that it's like the detours and like finding a thing and not and getting to the point and just saying, you know what, this isn't working is okay, right? To make an entire soundtrack and to scrap it is part of the process, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But in marketing world, like in the business world, like largely, those are seen as like detours of failure, or of like, oh, we just spent a bunch of time and energy and resources on this thing that like, we didn't end up doing. Whereas like in film, it's like there's so much stuff like that you end up just getting constrained on, and you end up having to do, other things. And, we all say that Spielberg's a genius for Jaws, but the reason why he's a genius for Jaws, amongst many other reasons, is because he literally couldn't just make the shark work. Like if the shark didn't work,
the shark actually sank on the second day of shooting and they couldn't get it up. That was it. They were like, oh God, the shark sank. What do we do? Of that experience gets back to one of the marketing, we want to talk about marketing insights. There's moments that we all have as marketers where real ideas happen, and I celebrate those. I have a show that I do myself called Eureka, because I just love figuring out how did you come up with that idea? Like that thought about, I interviewed the Impractical Jokers one time, and I was like, guys, where was it that you were like, I know, let's videotape ourselves doing this thing, and then let's whisper into each other's ears what we have to say. Like, where did that idea come from? And they talk about, but I just love hearing in that moment. But in truth, and this is what was going to be my takeaway from Eureka, was that there is not one singular, back to your point, Ian, not one singular moment. It's a series of failures. And then you're like, well, this is the least crappy version of what I'm looking to do. Let me go with that. And I think Kubrick, in a lot of ways, went through all like a clear plastic monolith, a monolith with different dimensions. Can you imagine the monolith if it were square? Like, that's not a monolith in my head. I don't know why, but he went through all different shapes and and can you see through it and all that stuff. So just knowing that we all think of the monolith as this perfect 1x6x9 perfect symmetrical rectangle. I have no idea why I know those metrics, but that's what it is. The attempts that they made to make it as interesting as possible were in this risk that they all took. Like, I'm going to do this thing and it's crazy. And I have $10 million. By the way, it went over budget by a lot. But that inspiration, I think, is evident in the film, and it's evident that in the actual process of trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing, and then getting to a point where you're like, wow, this is actually kind of okay. I think it's the least bad one that I've made.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, another I think takeaway for me is, so it stems from this short story called The Sentinel, right? And so there's this thing. It's written by this guy, and then him and Kubrick end up sitting down.
Clark, right?
Yeah. And they end up sitting down and writing, the film.
Collaborating, yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is that Clark goes on to say later that he's basically like, I'm borderline insulted that people think that this is even anything like what I wrote, like originally, that like what we created is so derivative of this, like that it's so far away that it's like, it's not even, sort of close. And I think that that's like another important sort of takeaway from a marketing standpoint is, and I think especially in the age of AI and the way that we're able to create things in 2025, which is getting from 0 to 1 and like crafting an idea that can then become something else, and then working on that to get to like V45 is the work that needs to be done. And I think that sort of the inspiration of that being finding an inspiration from somewhere, but that's not that's not the blueprint, right? It's like you still have to go build the blueprint. And so I just think that that's an important point. It's like, oh, well, this is something that, is that they, adapted, and it's not. It's a completely different thing, even though it is, but it's just different. And so I think that, like, again, as marketers think about creating things, like, you can just take inspiration from something, but you're ultimately going to go rewrite it in your own way anyways.
Right, you're totally right. There's one, Meredith, I thought you were going to go there with it. Sorry, I thought you were going to it. The biggest co-star, or the third star of the movie, is Hal. And Hal is AI, effectively the artificial intelligence running the Discovery spaceship going to Jupiter. And Hal, unfortunately, was told a lie when they all boarded the spaceship. So, it was bad. Don't tell computers lies because it's bad. But Hal, of course, was named after IBM. One letter shifted over, HAL, IBM, HIAL. Anyway, they used Hal as a character, and we as marketers are all now using AI, optimally, more proactively to help us do our jobs more easily. But we are steps away from having it help, us do bigger and bigger things. And this, what we have to remember is that Hal is capable of running the ship, but is not capable of imagining how to make the mission successful.
Right.
And Dave Poole, who, survived, is a reflection of today's marketer. Stick with me for a second. When AI is capable of telling us all the steps we need to do to run a marathon, for example, it is not capable of inspiring us to go out and run a marathon. It will never say, you know what, Josh Golden, you need to run a marathon because you need to find something hard and a big hill and something else. It would never say that. It can say, if you want to run a marathon, first you start off running, this kind of length, and then, then you rest for a day, and then you run this length and run the rest for a day. And then by the 12th week, you're ready to run your first half marathon. You do that, you do all those pieces. The steps to do the hard thing is what all the LLMs can do, because they know all the history of the universe, collapsed into words in English. And it's a word calculator. As Shelley Palmer says, it's consciousness decoupled from intelligence. There's no consciousness, it's just intelligence. So humans have the capacity to do the wow factor, have the capacity to come up with something that goes like, I didn't even think of, why would I make a movie about something that doesn't even exist? We would never come up with any of these thoughts. Hal is very rational. And even there's an argument that happens in the movie where, I don't want to give it all away, but there's an argument between the AI and
I think you
Dave
can
Poole.
give it away. It's
I can? Okay. They're arguing. He goes to save his crewmate, and Hal, exits one of the astronauts, and Dave Bowman goes out to save Frank Poole, his partner, the other human, and he grabs him by the the little grabby tongs, then comes back to the spaceship to let him back in. He says, Hal, open the pod bay doors. And Hal says, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And then Dave says, Hal, open the pod bay doors. He's like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And they repeat it a few times. And then finally Hal says, Dave, there's no reason for us to continue this conversation. And that's it. So it's just like, that's the argument. And he has to figure out how to get back on the spaceship and then basically, unplug the computer so he can get to finish the mission. The point of that little argument is that we disagree often with what AI can offer us because it isn't perfect. And there is a sort of lack of understanding of the human condition. This is the opportunity for marketers to recognize that wow, that surprise factor that really at this point still humans have cornered the market on is what will make us different and is what will make our ideas different and better. Because yes, I can know the format of a press release and so does it. But I will tell you that if I do something special in that press release, which is a surprise, that is what will be picked up and that is what will be recognized. And that's where marketers need to focus on, no longer like the flow and the format of a press release, but like what is going to make this press release special. because now everybody can do a press release. It's now what is the thing that's going to elevate it to that next level of brilliance, which is strategy and insight and the wow factor. And that came, in my mind, from this movie 2001.
Yeah. I think there's also like the way that Hal is depicted. Obviously, you have this red dot. You have this, I mean, it's menacing in its sort of presentation, which is it's
omnipotent. It's everywhere. It sees everything. It's able to read lips.
Yeah. And it's just so funny that, like, you know, today's AI, which do a lot of those things or can do a lot of those things or all of those things, but AI is inherently not a red dot that's staring at you, right? It's like a text box, which I think is obviously very purposeful. But you have, like, in WALL-E, the AI of the ship is basically Hal, right? It's like almost the exact same thing, right? With basically a very similar premise that they lifted, which is like, hey, I was told to keep everyone safe. That's what I'm doing. You know, going home going back is not safe, right? Same sort of thing. Yeah, and I think, and I just think it's an important sort of, the visual identity of the AI, right, is like a very important piece of this, and everything in the film is very visual, obviously, but having that scary red dot.
Yeah. I mean, so the derivation of that was that they used an anamorphic wide-angle lens to put a little light behind it, a little light, and that was it. And they moved it around to, you know, be in all the scenes, and that became a character, which is really interesting to have a character be a light. And the voice actor gave all the sort of the lack of emotion that it needed.
I was going to say personality. Yeah,
right. I mean, but like, when you hear Siri, what's the difference? I mean, Siri is just like, you know, the now it's, you know, different with when the light comes on, you're like, oh, that's me talking to my computer. That all these things exist now-ish. And, you know, FaceTime is in the movie, and, you know, all these, you know, concepts that were invented now kind of exist. I actually think it's the job of the sci-fi writers to invent the future, because I think that they are always thinking like, well, what if the space elevator could exist? How difficult would it be to make that?
I mean, sending information, you know, across the world in a matter of a second was also possible too. So, I mean, maybe there's stuff we don't know. The truth is out there, if someone once said.
Truth is out there, you just need to find it or write about it.
Yeah. I'm curious. So to finish the point on the science fiction writers create the future. So I have given a talk, and the title of the talk is that marketers can create the future. And so I think it's actually the job of the marketer to do that, because we have better budgets than our friends who write sci-fi.
Do.
And I think we don't take that seriously enough. And I think that, like, I don't know why. I think it's just a fear of failure or a fear of being wrong or something, that I don't know why more marketers don't try to tell futuristic storytelling, but it's like inherently fascinating and you don't have to get it right. And, you know, Back to the Future is one of our favorite movies ever, and, you know, all these sort of things. And one of the reasons why Back to the Future is such an awesome movie is because it's hilarious how quickly the future came and none of that stuff happened. You know? Zero. Also, the concept of the metaverse was immediately disproved, and it's now referenced in every current movie. Like, wait, Back to the Future isn't real? I mean, no, it's not real. It's a movie. But the concept is so fabulous, and time travel and the existence of and the ability to do such, you know, wild things is it's not that far. Not that far. And so I think it's obviously this movie is extremely important for all the people that, I mean, this is 1968. This is a long time ago. And it's something that the people that took inspiration from this built things like Minority Report and all the other things. And those people and the people who consume those, you know, building on the shoulders of giants and whatnot. And so I just think it's important to sort of discuss in that way, which is at that moment in time, this was the best depiction of the future ever. Right.
Yeah. And also its use of music, like the Barbie movie opens with "Thus Spakes," also Spake Zarathustra as well. How many times is da 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 dun, dun. How many times did you hear that? And you're like,
so
I don't
true.
know why I hear that song all the time, but it does feel like that feeling of like there's something that's going to happen and it's scary a little bit and I am interested in it. But that, I got to say, I must have seen it 15 times. It's used in current movies. Mel Brooks used it in History of the World Part 1.
Yeah.
Like it's been again and again and again.
Yeah.
And the reason why was because it was such a seminal thought. It's funny. My wife and I were talking about this recently. What's one piece of music that really scared you when you were a kid? This song or whatever from the movie scared me. Hers was "Come Together" by the Beatles, and it was like a scary song to listen to, but it was fascinating. And I think in '68, because of course similar timeline, all these things were experimenting and trying new ways of what are the new things that we can do that are still, I feel still current now. I mean, if you listen to "Come Together," you're like, God, it's a great song. And in '68, this was innovative and interesting and different and scary. And that's what I think as marketers, our job is to try to do the scary thing, or at least be willing to test it. And sometimes you get a home run. And I think that's what the point is. And maybe you're right that we are a little more scared because of the risk that we're always sort of facing as marketers, trying to figure out what is the way that we should go here. And if we had a little more latitude, we might be willing to risk more things. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, advertising was much more linked with marketing. Was its own thing, advertising and then marketing. But advertising certainly was willing to take risks. I mean, imagine the lemon ad from VW, right? That was a risk to talk about a car as a lemon, but differentiating it in such a strong and powerful visual way that made it recognizably different. And then like, well, maybe I'll consider it. I should try it. And then, of course, then it became an iconic ad and a very successful launch.
Yep.
That piece of marketing was a high risk and a real statement. And I'm not positive marketers are taking the same level of the altitudes of risk that we had in the past.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also, there's a great film called Arrival, if people haven't checked it out, that has a lot of similarities to this. There's a big, obelisk type thing, and there's other stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was listening to the great David Mamet talk about Arrival, and he was saying something really interesting that you might like, Josh. He was saying that that the hard part of Arrival is the figuring out, how he says, is talking to the octopuses. And he's like, the rest of the entire movie should not exist. Because that is the hardest thing in the movie, is to figure out how to speak to them. And so
this is what Mamet said about it?
That's what Mamet said about Arrival. Is he was like, all the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. It's like the crux of the movie is the hardest thing in the movie is the thing that you need to be solving, and that the hardest thing is talking to the octopuses. Once you figure that out, the movie is over. Like, you've done it, sort of thing.
I'm a terrific fan of this film as well.
I know, I love Arrival, but I think that it's a really interesting just like point to think about futuristic storytelling, and to say like, so Arrival, this is something where they do show the aliens. That's part of it, is them like seeing it, and so it's different. But I just think that it's, from a story perspective, I think it's interesting to think about Mamet in this as a storyteller, to say, what is the hard thing that you're trying to figure out in the future
thing, right?
Like and tell that story. Because if you told a story in the same way that you were to try to tell 2001, like, it would not work in today's culture. But some other type of story would. And like Arrival is a great example, which is we've seen a million alien movies before, but the hard thing about an alien is they speak a freaking different language. Like, yes, and Close Encounters is the same thing, and et cetera. But anyways,
I agree.
Yeah,
the center of that movie for me is the concept of a circular movie, in that you can start anywhere you want in that movie. That's the big brief is I want to be able to watch the movie from any singular point and watch to the point where I started it, and it should feel complete as a whole.
Yeah.
I've never seen a film like that had you can start. It's like Seinfeld episode. You can start anywhere, and it doesn't matter. Yeah. So you could start anywhere in that movie. You could start at the end. You could start at the beginning. You could start at the middle, and you watch to the point where you stopped. And you're like, that is a perfect movie to that. It works because the concept is expressed in the language of the aliens' communication style. It isn't it isn't a linear path of communication. It is one complete thought already told in the circle. And I think that thought expanded into, I think she even says it in the movie herself. She says, when you learn to speak a different language, your brain changes because you're able to sort of think differently. And the way that they communicated in the Aliens was communicating circularly, which is everything was one big thought. And I think the thought in the Arrival was survival. And there's a couple movies that I rewatch a lot. I don't know why exactly, but I rewatch that. I rewatch Interstellar. I'm a little sci-fi, but I also rewatch It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know why, but I like these touchstone-y movies that make me connect me to like, what is the thought there that I enjoy so much? It's a Wonderful Life it is so important to care about people. Mm-hmm. It is so important in Interstellar to do the hard thing. It's so important in Crazy Stupid Love to dream of the impossible, and those things are worth it as themes. And I just love living in the theme and like watching in it and be like, yes, this is it. Which is why I watch 2001 at least once a year. It's a commitment, but I do love it.
Yeah. Well, any other final sort of marketing thoughts here before we get out of here?
Yeah, marketing thoughts. So many. It's as a marketing thought. Okay, I have seen now sort of this evolution that's been happening. I just came back from Cannes, and we did this great insight. I was watching my daughter flip through a catalog. She's 16, and I was like, just curious, what's interesting to you there? She's like, I just love that I love these. She was like, I was in these clothing, but I was like, well, how did it feel? She's like, well, it's quiet. And I was like, it's interesting. So I asked the Harris poll, I was like, tell me about what's happening with Gen Z and millennials and even Gen Alpha, like what's going on with them. And we discussed and discovered that there's this sort of, interest in the physical again. Like they're willing to wait online to have a physical experience because they want to put their phone down. I'm going to say they want to capture it with their phone, but they want to experience things together. I think it's more of the reaction to the pandemic that they were sort of, tucked away for a couple of years and they're all looking into that revenge IRL experience and also that digital detox that they all really need. I don't really need it. Like I can put my phone down and away for a day or half a day or whatever. I'm fine without it. But young people really can't. And I think that the research suggested this return of touch, that people want to go back and, be tangible. And that's having this really big impact on marketers. And obviously Quad, our history is in manufacturing and paper, ink on paper effectively. And that medium is coming back with like a roaring interest because so many of the channels are filled with so many things that it makes it really difficult to break through, where now the mailbox becomes the sort of more easy to access way to get to your audience, specifically because Quad knows where everyone lives and knows the passions that they have. We already know. So it gives us an interesting little angle. So there was a nice little conversation we're having at Cannes about the return of touch and how a new metric, the ROT, return of touch as a metric on how return on touch, like what's the value of touching something? And it's now measurably different. When someone touches something, they're more likely to want it and purchase it. So I was just thinking about that as we were coming back from Cannes and having that experience of telling that story it really resonated. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's funny. On Friday, got a knock on my door and it's 3 kids that live around the corner. Yeah. And I don't know these kids at all. And they're like, hey,
like, yes, I'll buy your stuff.
Yeah. They're like, hey, can we wash your trash cans? And I was like, how much? They're like $30. I was like, great. Get after it, guys. So they like, can we borrow the hose? They had like a little thing. They got their dog with them. It was the cutest thing. And so they finished. Turns out like one of them knows my nephew. It's like really cute. Anyways.
I've never heard of washing trash cans. It sounds like something I don't tell. Like put the baking soda in the refrigerator. It'll make your refrigerator smell better. Like, yeah. How do I know if it's smelled bad? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, let me tell you, mine, maybe they smelled mine because they were pretty awful.
It was bad?
It was bad enough. And so anyways, afterwards, they're leaving. I'm like, thanks so much, guys. Whatever. I like gave them $50 and then they had to like go find the change. It was hilarious. Anyways, yeah. So they come back, get it all done. By the way, I have the cleanest trash cans you've ever seen in your life. They're fantastic. Amazing. So as they're walking
water,
away,
dog.
Yeah, it's great. As they're walking away, they go, hey, thanks. I'm like, yeah, thanks. And they're like, you're our first customer. They'd never even done it before.
Amazing. Think about how hard they work. They're like, oh my God, now we have to figure out, like, what do we do? Like, what do we do here?
Well, I should ask them, what are they going to do with the $30? But anyways, to your point, right? Like the lived in experience of these three kids of like not being on their phones, not doing whatever, just literally one of them washing the cans, the other two just standing, watching the one who's washing. Like it was just, the whole thing was fantastic. But I think that, like, to your point, it's like, I mean, that's what I used to do, stuff like that when I was a kid. Yeah. Kids were doing that 50 years ago, and then they would go watch Close Encounters or, whatever, Charles. Which is now 60 years. So 50 years ago, they watched Close Encounters. And so, yeah, I just think that, to your point, like that the little physical things, the things like that, the non-digital, that I think just to abandon it, to just say, oh, this next generation doesn't do that anymore, is like a pretty silly
Such a silly thing to say. Of course they do it. We just have to give them the materials that's engaging to them. So you have to do both. And I love that we're their first customer, but I also think that they will not forget that experience of that first $50. Think about how many things you can experience in TikTok per hour. 200, 300, 400 things.
That's right.
All meaningless. All goes away. But the experience that you have with something in person, that is the thing that you remember. That's the story when you fell over crying and laughing so hard because you did something. It's very rare. I mean, yes, you can laugh at something when someone falls on the TikTok, but like when something happens in the real world, you remember it. And I think we've, as marketers, gotten a little drunk on measurement and gotten a little drunk on, well, I can just do it on digital. We forget that the physical is what is going to matter, and the physical is what's going to drive that potential customer to engage more deeply and care about your brand. That's it, man.
Without a doubt. And like you even mentioned, I went to this theater with my dad who loved it. And there's strange smells in the air and there's all sorts of things going on.
What's going on here?
Yeah. I'll say the final thing on that story is, as they come up and then we start talking, I'm like, yeah, you can wash the trash cans. Their dog like walks up and poops in the center of my lawn. And I'm like, these kids were mortified. And I was like cracking up. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I'll get you back, guys.
Yeah. And anyways, it's just like you said, that's what's memorable. And and if you make a masterpiece, it's memorable, or clean somebody's trash.
Certainly. It can be. I think it's our job to endeavor to make something amazing.
Josh, wonderful having you on the show. For listeners, go check out.
I loved it, Ian. Thank you so much. Thank you, Meredith, for doing such a great job of running down the movie, too.
Thank you.
Listeners, go check out Quad. If you haven't already, go to quad.com. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug, Josh?
No, I'm just so excited to have done this. And I'm a crazy fan of you and this podcast, and I'm just so appreciative of you having me on. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye now.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.